In this video, we're going to look at kind of a word problem situation with a graph attached and try to evaluate and talk about things a little bit more using this function notation vocabulary. In this problem, Jamie is selling homemade scented candles. We have a graph here that represents her profit from selling the candles. Notice that our x-axis here lies along this value and represents our number of candles sold. Our y-axis over here is in increments of 25 and indicates our profit in dollars. So as we go through, let's see what we're being asked here. In part A, it's asking us what is the input variable. Your input variable always correlates with your x coordinate. So our input variable in this case is going to be what's like the units that are represented by what's lying along the x-axis. So in this case, our input variable is the number of candles sold. If you know the number of candles sold, you should be able to figure out your profit. And that's what part B here is asking, is what is the output value? If you know the number of candles sold, we can use this graph to figure out the profit. And that's going to be our variables, is that profit in dollars. Again, when we talk about input, thinking about that in terms of X. When we talk about output, thinking about that in terms of Y is very helpful from a function notation perspective. The next questions are kind of asking us to evaluate our function or to solve our function based on the questions that they're looking at. In part C, it says if Janie sells 90 candles, her profit will be blank. Well, that means we need to look for 90 on our input scale. Here's 90 is our x coordinate, and we want to go up and see where the graph crosses at that x equals 90 spot. So we can come up here, notice that it lies at 100. Our unit is in dollars, so her profit if she sells 90 candles will be $100. The next question is asking us to work on our function a little bit differently. If Janie sells blank candles, her profit will be $200. Well, this is an output, so we need to look for $200 on our output scale. That's the very top line up here. We'd like to see how many candles she needs to sell. So if we take this $200 and we look all the way out to where the graph line crosses, that happens right here at this very last spot at the end of the graph. It's just after 140. If you look back at the scale, it should be all equally spaced, so each square of the graph is corresponding to 10. So this extra space right here is going to correspond to 150. It's always a good idea when you're doing word problems to include units that you're talking about. So in this case, she's selling 150 candles to end up with that $200 profit. Now, occasionally you're going to be asked to interpret points or values for our problem, and really what that means is talk about what the units are that these are representing. So for example, here we have an ordered pair 60-50. We want to talk about what that means. Well, let's think about it. First, let's find it on the graph, and then let's talk about what the meaning might be. 60 is our x-coordinate, so we go out 60 this way. 50 is our y-coordinate, so we go up here. So this is the magic point that we're talking about on our graph. Looking at it on the graph is nice because then you can see it associated with the units values, and that's really what we're talking about when we look at this sort of ordered pair. What we want to see is that 60 is on the x, which correlates with the number of candles being sold. 50 is on the y, which correlates with the profit in dollars. So saying something to the effect of, if Janie sells 60 candles, she makes $50 profit. Is a great interpretation for this case. Really, again, most of the time when they ask these interpretation problems, just being able to talk about what units are associated with each number goes a really long way in understanding what's happening. The last two problems ask us to identify intercepts. And remember, an intercept is where the graph crosses an axis. In problem F, it asks us to give us the coordinates of the horizontal intercept. Remember, horizontal means left to right, and in this case what that means is the x-axis. So the horizontal intercept is where my graph crosses the x-axis. Well, for us, that's going to be right here. Here's our x-axis. It crosses right at this point right here. From the coordinate perspective, the x-coordinate always comes first. That lies in between 20 and 40, so it's going to be 30. The y-coordinate is 0 because it lies right, 30, not 3. 30. The y-coordinate is 0 because it lies right on that axis point. So that's going to be the coordinate point, and now we can interpret it. What this means in our case, again, 30 is the number of candles. If 30 candles are sold, Janie would make $0 profit. Now, with a little bit of an economics background, what that might mean this might actually have kind of an interesting and important meaning to you. When you make 0 profit, that's when you break even. So what this is saying here is that 30 candles is that break even point. If she sells less than 30 candles, she's going to still be owing money in terms of her business. But if she sells more than 30 candles, then she'll start making a positive value of profit. So something like this, just using the units is great, but if you can take it that next step and use that as a further interpretation of our situation, that's always really, really nice to do. And these intercepts become really important points because they are places where interesting things like this happen. That's kind of that cutting bridge between a situation where you're losing money and making money. So that's an important, if it's your business, that's going to be an important piece of information for you. The last problem here asks us to give the coordinates of the vertical intercept. And again, remember, vertical means up and down, which means this time we're looking at the y-axis. So here's our y-axis. The intercept is where it crosses. And so this time we're looking at this point right here. If we are giving the coordinates, it's going to be 0 left and right. And the y-coordinate value is down at -50. To interpret the meaning, in this case, 0 is the x value. So if Janie sells 0 candles, she loses, that's where that negative comes in. She's going to lose $50 in her investment. She doesn't make any profit at all. And so, again, if you can kind of take that to an interpretation for the situation, if you've sold 0 candles and you still have a loss, that's going to kind of be our startup costs. So maybe she has to buy into the business franchise. Maybe she has to buy materials to make the candles, something like that. But that $50 is a startup cost, and she's got to overcome that before she can actually start making profit. So this 0, -50 gives us another really interesting piece of information about her about her candle business, and we can see that point by identifying the vertical intercept and then another interesting point there with the horizontal intercept. So they're always important pieces to find and identify and think about what meaning they might have in the context of your problem.